It's one of those things where it's gonna make your life easier, so why not go ahead and take a little step to make it easier and more fun in order to get into this entire project. What is up, everybody, and welcome back to Altknots. I am super excited to have you along here today because we are once again gonna bust out the Addi machine, and I love the Addi machine. It is just one of those things, it's just fun. Like, baseline is, the Addi machine is so fun. You can do things really quickly. You can mess around and screw things up 5 or 6 times, and it's fine because you can just unravel it and start again, and that whole process maybe took you like 15 to 20 minutes. I just genuinely love it. So I'm really excited that a bunch of you ghouls were really excited as well about the Addi machine, and we're like, please send more patterns, send more tutorials our way. We want to go ahead and get into the Addi machine a little bit more. So that is what we're going to be exploring today. Also, if today is your first day ever here at Altknots, welcome to the Yarn Dungeon. Welcome to the Ghoul Squad. Hopefully you love it and you want to subscribe and hit the notification bell as well to actually join the Ghoul Squad, because we're all about crochet, yarny goodness, all sorts of spooky Halloween. Basically, baseline is, if you love Halloween and it is your life, definitely go ahead and join the Ghoul Squad, because that's what we're all about. So, like I said, we're gonna go ahead and bust out the Addi machine today, but I didn't even say what it is that we're doing. You probably saw it on the thumbnail, but we're gonna be making an infinity scarf today. And I just feel like infinity scarves are one of those things where it's on the same level as a cowl. It's just like a universal thing that you can use as gift giving or for yourself. Obviously, I am all about making presents for yourself or making things for yourself in general. But once you get going on the Addi machine, you're like, okay, well, I can make these super quick, so I definitely should go ahead and gift these out to people. But yeah, I just feel like infinity scarves just look good on everybody, and it looks good in any sort of attire as well. And it's really fun to make on the Addi machine because we're gonna be making it in a tube. So we're not even gonna have to mess around with doing like a flat panel, so you don't have to like watch your edges. We're just gonna go ahead and attach our yarn on there and just keep cranking. Like, that's all we're gonna do. So I thought in order to do a couple of extra add-ons to it, we'd go ahead and change colors a couple of times within the scarf. You don't have to do this, but I thought, you know, at least you have the option here and you can see how to do it. So I have the yarn that I'm using today is the Premier Basix. So here we go. We have this one. I'm just thinking it's gray. It's called light gray, okay? And then this one is called black. So nothing crazy. That's just their names. So first and foremost, the most important part about getting started on the Addi machine is finding a yarn that the Addi machine is really gonna like and is gonna be super compatible with it, because when you're just starting to do a project, you don't want to have to be fighting with your yarn. So I constantly beat up my Addi machine and be like, I want you to use this type of yarn. So it's totally possible. You can use all sorts of different yarns, but if you're just getting started, I would suggest a number 4 worsted weight, which is what this is. And it's just, I'll go ahead and pull out a little bit of it so we can go ahead and just appreciate this for what it is. It's tightly wound. There's not a lot of floof. There's not a lot of extras that are gonna come off of it, because that's the main thing. You don't want yarn that's gonna have a ton of floof when you're starting to learn on the Addi machine. So this one is absolutely perfect. The Addi machine is going to love it. And so the only thing that you really are gonna have to work with is user error on the Addi machine. So there are a million different types of yarn that actually works really well on an Addi machine, but this one is just my favorite. It's just my favorite go-to type of yarn for the Addi machine. So I'll link it down below if you're interested, but I will be using different yarn throughout all of my tutorials on the Addi machine, just so you can see it. But for getting started, just look for something like this, I guess. That's just the baseline. Worsted weight, number 4, you're good to go. Your Addi machine is gonna love you for it. So that is pretty much all you need in order to get started for this tutorial for the Addi machine. Obviously, you're gonna need your Addi machine here, and then make sure you have these clamps that go around the legs of your Addi machine. It's gonna come in really handy because it's gonna make sure that your Addi machine is stable and it's not moving around and jumping around as you're trying to actually make your infinity scarf here. So go ahead and pick a table, or if you have a designated area for your Addi machine, that's amazing. And if it's set up like constantly, that's fantastic. But I'm gonna go ahead and set mine up here, and we're gonna go ahead and get started on this here. Also, go ahead and grab some coffee too, because coffee and crochet and yarn and crafting just go together. So definitely go grab some coffee. I have my Brutality's dark roast. Then I'm gonna set this up and we're gonna dive into this infinity scarf tutorial. All right, so here we have everything all set up, ready to go. My Addi machine is attached to the table. It is not going anywhere. Exactly what I want it to be. Then the little switch on the side, there's one thing that says, what does it say? Plain knitting and circular knitting. For this tutorial, we are going to be doing a circular knitting because we are going to make an infinity scarf that is a tube. So it's going to be a nice, thick, chunky scarf, no matter how many rows you end up doing. Also, another thing that I did forget to say in the beginning here is that you are going to need some waste yarn. So this is yarn that is going to be cast on here first, and it's going to hold your live stitches. So it's going to help reduce the risk or the chance of a live stitch falling and slipping and you not being able to catch it when you actually go back and sew everything closed. So the fact that it's called waste yarn, please, please, please do not throw it away. Once we're done with it, I have a little jar over to the side here that I put all my waste yarn in. The one that I constantly use and that I love happens to be red, and so it's really not great for tutorials because you can't really see it in between all of the red on the Addi machine. So we're just gonna go ahead and get started, and for me, I really love to start by casting on 5 rows of waste yarn. So that's what we're gonna do. So get whatever color you want, and it's best if you can use a yarn that's really similar to the weighted yarn that you're actually starting to work with. It's just going to make the transition a little bit easier when you actually start casting on that actual base yarn there. So go ahead and scroll around until you find the very first 3 black needles here, and we're going to put them to the right of your yarn gauge here. It doesn't need to be open yet, but so we're going to start with the very first white one. That is what we're going to do, and for this it's waste yarn, so maybe just do about 6 to 7 inches start off. Throw that in the middle there. Then on the very first needle, we're gonna start by going in front of it, so this needle actually like holds onto it, and then we're gonna alternate in between each needle. So behind the next one, in front of that one, behind, in front, behind, in front. So do that all the way around here, and this is just essentially casting on your waste yarn, which is awesome. And I need to move this here. That's also another thing. I like to just go ahead and set this like either in a yarn bowl on the ground or just like in between your legs, whatever is easiest for you, but you just have to be able to like pull the yarn out so it's not getting like tangled or stuck. Just kind of be aware of it. But I'm gonna stop chit-chatting here and actually, there we go, behind. Cast the entire thing on here now. And then we go the last 3 here. So we started with the white one and the yarn was in front of it. And now this very last black needle, the yarn is behind it. That's awesome. You did it correct. That's what we want. Now we're going to go ahead and open up this yarn gauge. And so scroll over just a little bit, but don't, when this is open, your needle will get caught on this. So make sure that you're not really reeling through when this is open, because you definitely can break a needle. So go ahead and pop that in the yarn gauge and make sure it goes all the way through that little dot there. Just go ahead, clasp it over. Now we're actually going to go ahead and cast on 4 more rows. So if you want, you can go ahead and just clear up your counter here so you can count and make keep track of the 4 rows. But for the very first one, go slow. Make sure that it actually is catching it and that you're not dropping any stitches here. Otherwise, it would defeat the purpose of casting on the waste yarn. So once you have that first row in, you definitely can go a little bit faster then. But once again, still keep track and pay attention to your stitches there. All right, so I found my scissors here. Go ahead and cut like maybe, 6 inches there. It's really not necessary. You don't need to actually count how much you cut off there. Just cut enough so you give a little bit of a leeway in case it gets pulled or yanked on. It's not going to actually pull the stitch there and affect the rest of your pattern. But all right, so next you're going to go ahead and open up this yarn gauge again and take that yarn out. Make sure that this yarn stays in front of this very last black needle here because that is actually part of it. So that needs to stay there. Then we're gonna go ahead and take our main color, which for me happens to be the black Premier Basic here. All right, once you have the end of the yarn, your main color of yarn here, go ahead and reset your counter here because we're gonna go ahead and do 20. So in order for this one, I do 20 rows and then switch off to color B and I do about 4 rows of this, then switch back again. So that's going to be the repetition for the entire pattern here, or the infinity scarf. 20 rows of main color, 4 rows of the secondary color. So for this, once again, 6 to 8 inches here, and we're going to pop that part in the middle right through the yarn gauge. Then close the yarn gauge. Next, go ahead and start turning and go rather slow once again for your very first one. Just make sure that it's actually catching it and everything's holding up fine, which it should be. There is no reason, but okay, so here I'm going to go ahead and close up a little bit, but right here we have the waste yarn here is popping up and it needs to be popped down. So that's why you need this fun little loom pick. Pop it down like the rest of these here and then you can turn over. Well, same with this one. It just got a little stuck there and now we're good to go. If you don't pop that down there, you're basically gonna end up losing a stitch. So you just wanna make sure, keeping your eyes out for things like that. So now here we are on our first official row and everything's going really nice and you can hear the noise too. If you start hearing like some major clicking noise or it sounds like something's really pulling, just stop. Something is getting snagged, something is not in the spot that it's supposed to be, so definitely go ahead and check that. Otherwise, if you're hearing this noise, everything's beautiful and everything's going the way it's supposed to. So go ahead and do 20 rows here of the very first main color. All right, here we are at row number 20 and we're gonna go ahead and switch over to the secondary color. So once again, if you do not wanna do the secondary color, totally fine, just keep on going with your original color here. That's all there is. But if you are gonna change, go ahead and pull out once again about 6 inches there and cut off that working yarn. Then we're gonna go ahead and open up this gauge. I did go a little too far, so make sure this white needle is pushed in between so you have a needle in between or on either side of the yarn gauge. Go ahead and pull that yarn off, throw it in the middle there. Then once again, pull out some working yarn of your secondary color. Now we're gonna go and put it in the yarn gauge. Awesome. Whoops, not awesome. There we go. Squish it down. Now we're gonna slowly start scrolling here. And when you have 3 of these down, go ahead and go back and just tie these 2 together here. This is just gonna hold it in place while you're like making your scarf at the moment. So that way these 2 won't actually drop and you start losing stitches. It's just there to hold it in place. And then at the end, we'll go back and tighten all of these stitches. So once again, we're gonna go and do 4 rows. So it's at 20 here. So once we get to 24, then we'll stop and switch over to the main color. All right, so here we are at row number 24. And like I said, we're gonna go ahead and switch back to our main color here. So same thing, we're gonna go ahead and cut about another 6 inches there. And I did go a little too far once again. I like to go ahead and clear this And we're gonna do the same thing all over again. I'm not entirely sure how many rows of these that I wanna do, so I'm just gonna scroll through this, doing the same thing, do 20 rows of the main color, 4 rows of the secondary color, and then I'll meet you at the end and tell you how many rows I ended up doing here. Everybody's gonna want their infinity scarf a little bit different. I like to be able to wrap it around at least once, so that's what I'm gonna go for, but I'm gonna keep scrolling through this. You guys do the same thing, and yeah, we'll meet at the end and I'll tell you how many rows I actually came up with. All right, so I ended up doing 10 panels here in order to get the desired length for the infinity scarf. So that ends up being, with doing the stripe in between it, it ends up being 240 rows. So that's what we have for this entire scarf. Like I said, if you wanna make yours a little bit smaller, a little bit bigger, go ahead and either add an entire chunk or take away an entire chunk. Totally customizable, whatever you want. But anyways, I am at the end of the row here, so I'm gonna go ahead and cut that working yarn, and we're totally done now with this. Also, another reason I chose that number is because I was running out of yarn here and I only wanted to use the one skein. So that kind of had a little bit into making my decision of what number I wanted for the scarf. All right, now I'm gonna go ahead and add this waste yarn back in. I'm gonna do just 5 rows. Oh, I should probably clear that up. I'm gonna do 5 rows, and then we can go ahead and start actually attaching the scarf together. All right, here we are at 5, we're all good. So I'm gonna cut this waste yarn once again, open the gauge, throw it in the middle. We're all done with that waste yarn now. Now just go ahead and spin. Make sure that your gauge is closed, but go ahead and spin and get this entire scarf to drop off of your Addi machine. Once you get back to the beginning, it'll start to, there we go, it starts to fall off. Perfect, just keep watching it. In case it gets stuck there, you might have to help a couple of them off there. And the end one normally needs a little bit of extra help. So there we go. Now we are all done. Now we get to go ahead and attach both ends together. All right, so next we're gonna need to go ahead and make sure that this is super even and there are no twists in it. Then fold the piece over on itself, because we're gonna close up this end. So we want the 2 sides with the waste yarn matching together there. So next you're gonna need a crochet hook here for whatever size yarn you chose to use. And since I used worsted weight, I'm using a 5.5 millimeter hook, which is definitely one of my favorite hooks in the entire world. So in order to tell which stitch here is live, that's why we have this super crazy contrasting color to it. Right here, this loop, or let me do a little close up. There we go. This gray loop right here, that is a live stitch. So this is live, that one's live, that one's live. All right, now we're gonna look over here. Same thing, super contrasting. This little loop here, that is, since it's a black yarn, that's the yarn we were using, then so that is a live one, there's a live one, there's the next one, here's a buddy, it's a live one. All right, so now we're gonna go ahead and basically slip stitch the ends together. So that's why it's important that it's not twisted, because these 2 sides are gonna get slip stitched together. So since this was a striped scarf here, you can really decide which one you want to use. You can use yarn that's gray to close it, or the black yarn. I am using the black yarn simply because I only have a little tiny baby bit left of it, and I have almost a full skein left of the gray one, and I'm definitely going to use that for another project. So that's the only reason I chose it. But either way, you're going to need some yarn in order to close it, so just go ahead and attach that yarn onto your hook. I was really aggressive there. There we go. Attach it onto your hook, and we're just gonna pick a side here and attach that on. So right through that live stitch there. There we go. Now we're gonna go directly across, and we're gonna start closing this up. So through that same loop that you just went through, you're gonna do that again, go through it, and then just pick up another one. So we're gonna just pick this one here. There's the same amount of loops on both sides, so it doesn't really matter where you start. But anyways, so now we have that one started. So make sure you have these really well lined up, and just go ahead and take your time picking up that live stitch. There we go, pick up a live stitch, another live stitch, yarn over, and pull through to do a slip stitch, and now they're connected together. So there we go. If you want it to be a little bit of a bulkier finish, you can definitely do a single crochet instead of a slip stitch. It really is kind of up to you, but this is just the way that I prefer to do it. So I did forget to mention that there are a ton of ends on the inside here. It is important to go back all the way through and make sure that it's tightened up so it's not going to be loose, but we went through and did a double knot in most of them all the way throughout, so you shouldn't have any problem with that. If you want to, you can totally go back and weave those ends in if you would like. But the way I see it is, this is a tube. I'm never gonna see the inside of this. So I did not. And I just am like, well, it adds a little bit of squish to my scarf now. So that's just gonna be how that is. But you are more than welcome to weave all those ends in if you would like. So here we have the ends for the beginning and the end of the scarf. So we have the gray end here and the black end here. What I normally do is just go ahead and attach those two together with just a little knot, and then continue to go all the way around again. So as you can see, like if you pull this, it's live. So since we put waste yarn on it, we didn't actually finish or close this one. So once you get it together, they should line up pretty well. If not, just pay attention to the ones that are live here or your original piece, and just make a nice little knot. Once you've come all the way to the end here, now we're gonna go ahead and cut this working yarn, because we're totally done with that, and just yarn over once, pull that yarn through to make a nice little secured knot. Then we're gonna go ahead and pull off all of this waste yarn. So go ahead, well, there we go. That one was actually really easy, but you just run your fingers around and find the ending here of one of them, and it'll just unravel for you. Unless it gets caught up on other things, but anyways, it'll unravel for you, and that way you can go ahead and use it again. If it does get stuck, you can cut it if that's the easiest, because I totally understand if it's super, super stuck and tangled, and you know, sometimes it's just easier to cut it. But if you can, go ahead and just unravel all this waste yarn in order to reveal your amazing scarf here. Once you have that done, the only thing left to do is weave in your two ends here. So go ahead and grab a yarn needle, attach it onto that, and just weave all the way through. Then you have your amazing infinity scarf.
All right, you guys, so that's it. That's all there is in order to make this super simple infinity scarf on the Addi machine, basically in 30 minutes or less. So once you have the basics down, you have all the stitching, how to cast on, how to cast off, you could bust through these so quick. So if you loved this pattern and you definitely want to see more, let me know in the comments down below. Send me a black heart so I know that you love it, and I'll go ahead and keep on creating more of these. All right, but that's all I have for you guys today. So thank you so much for hanging out with me, and I'll see you in my next video.